Alrighty, so hello Victor, my name is Raewyn. I will be your interviewer today, and we'll just start off with the question of tell me about yourself and why are you here?
Well, my name's Victor Luca, Vittorio Luca actually, because it's of Italian extraction. My parents were immigrants from Italy here. I guess they arrived in the 50s. So I was born in Whakatāne. I went to school just over there, St. Joseph's, primary and intermediate, and then I went to Whakatāne High School. So I spent my entire youth here in this town. Well, I guess I was one of the top graduates at Whakatāne High School, and I was exposed to science there. It was the subject that I liked the most. All the science subjects, biology, math, chemistry and physics. And, you know, we have a beautiful environment here, so I really enjoy all of the aspects of nature here. We used to go orienteering up. Well, I remember Wednesday afternoon was orienteering afternoon, so I used to go running up Mokoroa in the bush. Yeah, there was no bird track in those days. You used to dive into the bush, and 3 hours later you would pop out. It was really cool. So that made an impression. And I guess I spent much of my youth, apart from when I wasn't in school. I used to play rugby and then soccer and then other sports. So I was into sports. Used to do all the usual things I used to do in those days before we had handheld devices and computers. It was about, you know, whitebaiting, fishing. I used to fish on the Whakatāne River. I have the record there for Kawai caught, 12 in the morning. Actually, it was in about an hour. And my record in my family. So it was we had both an indoor existence in school, and then it was outdoors, kicking balls around and all of the things this place has to offer. So I'll never forget it. It's part of me. I still consider this my town. Home is where the heart is. So, and so what am I passionate about?
Yes.
You know, well, I guess I took a love to science. It's driven me probably for 30 years. Science is not something you do for money. Most scientists I know aren't rich. Some of them can become rich doing other things, but normally a science job gives you a reasonable salary. I always thought that I was going to be okay if I had a science degree. I realised probably in the fourth year of university I liked the research aspect, because it was about boldly going where no man or woman has gone before, you know, Star Trek. Yeah. So that was it. It was new. And the thing that I liked about science is that it's about being able to make a difference, being able to make a contribution that goes beyond just the short life that we're going to have here. There's a chance, if you're lucky, if you've got, you know, if you're super bright or whatever, there has to be a bit of luck in it too, that you make a discovery that really improves the lives of people for years. So that aspect of being able to make a difference and improve, leave this a better place than where we found it. And I think science gives you that opportunity. So that's what it was about for me. What's your fondest memories? Well, yeah, I've got a lot of stuff in my head. Numbers, facts and figures. I guess when my kids were born, when I got married, the early days in this town, some of the fishing trips when you used to be able to go out there and catch tuna so easily, and it's not like that anymore. I remember once we filled the boat with snapper, 600 pounds of snapper we caught. That sort of got burnt into my head. I remember when my little brother was born. So yeah, I've got good memories. I had a good youth. I really would want anyone to have it, because this was a great place to be born and live. And I mean that with all sincerity. Tell me about people that you admire. Well, I guess I admire the great people of science, the ones that were able to make a change, that left a mark, that really think people like Pasteur or Heisenberg, the great people of science. Rutherford, one of our own, a Nobel Prize winning scientist. He discovered the atom, I guess, the father of the atom, I suppose. Yeah. He did some of his work in Christchurch, and then he moved to England. So these people make big impacts. and they've enriched our lives, because these little mobile devices that we've all got, you wouldn't have them, you wouldn't have the TV, you wouldn't have... I keep telling people that we have lifestyles today that kings and queens didn't have. Even the poorest of us, kings and queens, weren't able to live like that just a few hundred years ago. And I'd have to say that science is largely responsible for that. Science, technology, and there's also all sorts of other contributions. But all these, sometimes you wonder whether all these things have really made our life better. And science has also led us to where we are now, and we're now facing climate change, but that's not just a scientific issue. That's an issue that's got to do with socio-economics as well. So yes, the great people of science are people that I admire a lot. I admire my parents for what they were able to do for us. My parents always told us that they didn't have a chance to have an education, and we did, so we should go for it. And that's what I did. I'm an emblem of education, an icon, but sometimes I wonder if it was the right thing to do, but by and large I've had a pretty good run. What are your goals and aspirations when you were younger? Well, I guess goals and aspirations. We played a lot. We had a lot of fun. I did enjoy my science, and I got into it. I knew I was never going to be a great football player. I had fun at it, but it wasn't. And I think in terms of what I've done so far, I have achieved some things. I'm quite happy with what I think I'm a good scientist. I've done a good job. I've had a pretty full career, about 30 years of it. And
so what exactly do you do in science?
Well, I'm a chemist by training. I work on chemistry of materials. So some of the areas that I've been working on include things like the last two organisations I've worked for have been the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation based in Sydney, ANSTO. It operates a nuclear reactor on the outskirts of Sydney. That nuclear reactor is used to make nuclear medicine. So people who have a particular kind of scan, like a SPECT, that uses an isotope that my group that I've left behind is still researching on how to produce it in a cleaner way. So that's one of the things that ANSTO does. It produces isotopes for medicine. It also dopes silicon for the semiconductor industry. And the reactor allows scientists to do experiments because we use the neutrons that come off that reactor to do all sorts of fancy chemical experiments, biological experiments. There are people who study proteins. So proteins are important in medicine. It's important to know what the structure of tissue and cells are. Proteins are fundamental, and so there's a big effort on solving the crystal structure of proteins. If you know where all the atoms are, then you can figure out how things are working. And the neutrons that come out of that reactor are used for that. That reactor doesn't make power. It's not for generating electricity. It's for research. So I went to another nuclear establishment in Argentina because I married an Argentine woman, and we went to help her parents. They were not going well. So I transported the whole family there, and I ended up working in a similar role there. So I've worked on things like production of isotopes for medicine, development of materials for decontaminating water. So I know got a lot of technical background in water purification, radioactive waste management, because you might know that reactors make waste. The nuclear industry generates radioactive waste. It has to be disposed of. It's kind of like municipal waste. Very similar. There's organic waste, there's solid waste, but it's much more the waste that you generate here in town. What happens to the cars that we drive when they're at the end of their normal life? What happens to the tyres on the cars? What happens to what you throw in the rubbish bin in your house? The tin can, the glass, and all of that. How do you deal with it? Because you know that we have a problem with waste. Sticking it in a landfill is not a good option. It's the worst of the options. We really want to be not generating it in the first place, reusing something if we can. So I've been trying to promote, as part of my council role, I will try and promote bringing back the milk bottles to get rid of the plastic that we produce. Going back to the old ways sometimes actually is a step forward. It's not a step back. I would bring back natural fibres, more use of natural fibres and less use of petroleum-based products. So Whakatāne exists one of the first industries in Whakatane was, do you know what it was? Was making flax. Yeah, making fibres from flax. There was a flax work underneath the fountain in the middle of this fountain. Well, I think we're the only town in the world that has a waterfall in the middle. That waterfall was used for cleaning the fibres that were made. So why couldn't we bring back fibres? They could be made from hemp, which is the non-THC version of cannabis. So I think that natural fibres are going to make a big comeback. They've already started in the supermarkets. You can buy those bags. And of course, Māori fibres were fundamental for Māori. Clothing, baskets, everything. So let's step back a bit. I've worked on batteries for lithium-ion batteries that are going to be used in the new electric vehicles. I worked on those sort of materials. And I've worked on the development of materials for converting sunlight into hydrogen by irradiating water. So splitting water, because you know what water is, right? Yeah, well, the idea is to separate the O2 from the H2. And that can be done by irradiating a semiconductor, and I've been working on those sort of things. So I've got a wide breadth of experience in things like waste management and water purification, all things that are related to the infrastructure that a town needs. And so I think that's a difference that sets me apart from a lot of the other people. And also I've worked in the public service, which means that the money that I've used for my research and that I've had to acquire. I've had to convince people to give me money so that I can do the work in particular areas, which means that you have to be convincing, you have to be able to persuade. And then that money comes from the public purse, because I'm a civil servant, a public servant. I've been a public servant for 30 years, and the words tell you everything. We are servants of the public. And the council is a public service. It's part of the New Zealand public service. So people don't really get it, but if you've had 30 years in the public service, in any sector of the public service, all areas of the public service share a lot of the machinery in common. So yeah, that's I think I've got a lot to give in that area. So in the area of infrastructure. I've been a leader of research projects for which I've been given money. I've had groups of people up to about 12 or more, around 12, 15 people that have worked with me. And it's always been work in a kind of a consensus fashion, because in the public service, it's not like the private industry, In private industry, you've got a stick. I mean, the boss is the boss. You don't do what you're told, you could be out. But public service is different. You have to gain people's confidence. You have to be able to convince them that your vision is worthwhile pursuing, so that they can buy in and devote themselves to something. So that's what that's been about. Who are the youth of Kopeopeo? I was going to ask you that. I take it that the youth of Kopeopeo is a youth body. It's like a club. You tell me if I'm wrong. It's like a gang. Now, there was a question at Whakatāne High School about gangs, and we're all sort of gangs. I mean, your family's a gang, your town is a gang, your community's a gang. You guys have got together because you identify with each other. You say, okay, we share things and whatnot. You want to make a difference too. You want to have a voice, right? Yeah. Which is fair enough. So I think that's what you guys are about, having a voice, and you probably feel like you don't have much of one. Would that be right?
Yeah, especially with the youth of Kopeopeo.
Yeah. Well, I worked with young kids when I was here. It was my school holiday job. I actually worked with the council, and I've got a picture on my website of me doing barbecues. So we used to have, Graham Thomas used to be the recreation officer for this area. And we had up in the rock in the middle of the town, behind the rock, there's a thing that's got youth centre written on, or recreation centre written on it. There's a gym underneath it these days. Well, the top area used to have billiard tables, and we used to look after young kids, anything from 4 or 5 up to 18-year-olds, especially during the school holidays. We used to give them things to do. We used to hold activities. So, I guess I can identify with what you guys are about. It was like a club, you came along and you spent your summers there. So it was good. It was good. It was a good holiday job to have. What do you think like to be a young person in Kopeopeo? I think young people in Aotearoa, New Zealand, have facing issues that we never had when we were young. When we were young, we were kind of all the same. There wasn't the wealth disparity that there is today. Today, it matters what mother you came from. If you come from a rich mother, you've got a natural advantage. If you come from a parent who's got less money, then you're going to find it tough in today's world. And New Zealand started changing in the 70s or 80s, probably when I left, under the Longi government. In fact, Labour, who brought in the concept of user pays. And I think I never saw homeless in this town. And now I see people with shopping carts. It was one reason I left the United States, because although the United States is the richest country on earth, that money is concentrated. And so you see a lot of poor people around. And I think the youth face some, quite steep challenges, especially in the area of being able to maybe one day buy a house. I mean, if you're lucky, your parents will leave you one. If you're not, house prices are astronomical. Salaries aren't very high. So I see a lot of problems for youth in that department. Maybe we need to focus a bit more on sport. It's a good way of getting together and knowing people and having relationships. And one of the longest study in human history that's been going since 1938 is a study at Harvard University about the health of people that they've been following for all this time. And one of the most important factors in determining people's health they found is about relationships. So that's the Harvard study. I'm going to look it up. It's pretty important and it's still going. What is it like to be a person of your age in Kopeopeo? Well, I find this business of Kopeopeo, I guess it's just a name, although Kopeopeo has some specific problems, would you say?
I feel like it's kind of, I think it needs an upgrade, I guess, kind of.
But that's just the manicure.
Oh, no,
Are you talking about, are you just talking about the looks, the infrastructure, or?
Well, I guess, I'm not quite sure, to be honest. When I think about, which question are we on to?
Well, it's about, you say, what is it like to be a person in Kopeopeo? Everything's about Kopeopeo, but Kopeopeo is the name of a place.
Yeah.
But it's sort of, do we really mean like all of Whakatāne is, it's not just Kopeopeo. Whakatāne shares a lot, Kopeopeo is part of Whakatāne, so we're really talking about Whakatāne, aren't we?
I guess so,
Yeah, Kopeopeo has, as far as I can see, some specific problems to do with violence and things like that. And maybe it does need a little bit of a facelift. But this is your questions here, 7 to 9, are really about what's it like to be a young person in this district. Would you say that'd be right?
I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
Well, that's the way I interpret it. And my answer stays. It's, there are specific problems that young people today didn't have when I was young. When I was young, it was about just having a good time and being with friends and doing sport and enjoying the river, the bush, the beach, the sea, all of those things. You've still got them, but we've got mobile phones and computers. And sometimes, why have a friend on Facebook? You should have a friend in person. You know what I mean?
I guess so.
I think we tend to sit in front of our computers. And I'm all for computers. I live with them. I got one of the first ones that was going. I've been in computers for a long time, but I don't think they solve all our problems, and they generate some maybe. What do we want? What do we want with respect to our decision makers? Well, I guess you want decision makers who take note of what you're saying, of what your problems might be going forward. And like we just said, I think there are some specific problems that youth today have that they didn't have before. So we should be there to listen. I mean, listening's important, but listening without action is no good either. So in local council, local government, it's not responsible for everything. It only has certain powers to decide what happens with how we spend money that's been acquired through rates, through charging rates. But beyond that, there's also national government, central government. And central government has a lot more power than local government has, and I think that local government has a voice there. So the youth talk to us, whoever happens to be councillor or mayor, makes their message heard. I'm on the record of saying I've got an open door policy, and my open door policy applies to everybody. I don't care what religion, colour, culture you come from, or what age you are. If you want to come to me, if I were mayor, and knock on my door, I am your servant. I would be your servant. You are not my servant.
Yeah.
That is the role of a public servant. So I think that, you want to have some influence. You want people to take notice of your problems and do something to solve them. Maybe we should bring back the recreation officer. But it's good that you've formed this association, and that's a good start. Get together with people.
Yeah.
People in groups have more power than...
Then by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I always tell people that when in rugby league New Zealand beat Australia, that happened when I was still in Sydney. I think it might have been the 2007 championships. So it was a champion team.
Yeah.
1 for 1, Australia was better in all departments. So teams are important, and that's what sports teaches you. So I'd encourage you guys to play sport. What do you think our young people feel should be important to our decision makers? Well, I think you want to be heard, and we've got to be listening. That's our job.
Do you think it's important for everyone to vote?
Absolutely. Well, we have a democratic process, and I think our democracy in Aotearoa has worked. But as I said, the fabric of our socio-economic system has changed, and that's a big issue. And I think that there is a degree of wealth disparity in New Zealand that didn't exist before. And I was telling your colleague that there's a book by Max Rashbrook on inequality in New Zealand that's worth reading. It gives some statistics that are not very favourable. I think, if when you're doing sport or when you're in a group, you look for a role model. And I think we, as a country, could look around and say, well, what countries do we want to be like? Do we want to be like the Nordic countries, or do we want to be like the United States? Yeah. And a lot of people see the United States on TV. That when you go there, it's not quite, with your eyes open. Yeah. It is not as flash as it's made out to look. And I think we are a better country. We're a good country. Yeah. We tried to be a good country, and we should continue to try to be a good country. And a good country is a country that's good for everybody. And I think that in order for us to get to that goal, it's important that you vote for, people that are going to take us where we want to go. And a friend of mine at university used to say, talk is cheap, but it takes money to buy beer. So you're all in the pub and you say, okay, who's buying the next round? And it's the same in terms of voting and our democracy. It's all very well to talk, but it's, there has to be action. And so it's important to vote. Yeah, absolutely.